Hi there, John Manchimeli here from Australian Property and Finance Mastery, where we help you pay down your home loan in 6 to 9 years, either through structural changes in your mortgages or through investment property. Now, CoreLogic have just released their median monthly dwelling prices for each of the capital cities in Australia. It's January 2024, and it is absolutely amazing. Very interesting to see what's happened. There are two cities that have moved up the pecking order, and we're going to discuss which cities they are and why they've happened. So CoreLogic has just released their median dwelling values for all the capital cities in Australia. And no surprises, Sydney continues to be the most expensive capital city by a bull's roar at $1,128,000, followed by Canberra at $843,000. Now, for the first time in 20 years, and we'll discuss why this has happened, Brisbane. Brisbane is now the third most expensive capital city in Australia. And so there are three things that has caused Brisbane's median value to be higher than Melbourne's median value. And if you're curious to know more, I recommend you keep watching. Now, before I go into those three reasons, I think it's important to note that it's not the first time that Brisbane's median dwelling value has overtaken Melbourne's median dwelling value. In fact, if you look in this chart over here, right down the bottom, you can see that in December 2003 that Brisbane's house prices were actually higher than Melbourne's house prices. And I think what's fascinating to note is how these capital cities in Australia have changed over time. So whilst Brisbane had overtaken Melbourne in the early noughties, what we can see moving a few years down the track is Canberra started almost taking over Sydney as the most expensive capital city in Australia. And then moving, another 5 years later, you can see that Melbourne fell away in the ranking and became the fifth most expensive city in Australia, having dived quite a lot. And then moving quite a few years later, Hobart started rising up the ranks and became the fourth most expensive city in around the 2020s. So the fascinating chart here, and we can take a lot from this, but let's move on to now understanding what's happening with the Brisbane market. So the first reason why Brisbane's median dwelling values has overtaken Melbourne's dwelling values is the composition of the dwelling types. So if you look here, you will still see that houses in Melbourne in the red and units in Melbourne in the red are still higher than the value of the Brisbane houses and unit values. It's just that Melbourne has a disproportionately higher number of units. And so when you equate all of the data, it makes the Brisbane houses median value climb in value because Brisbane doesn't have anywhere near the number of units that Melbourne has. So the second reason why Brisbane's median dwelling values have overtaken Melbourne's median dwelling values is because of the ongoing boom that Brisbane has had. If you look at the chart down the bottom here around March 2020 at the start of the pandemic, you can see this red line here which represents Brisbane's median prices going up in value by a massive 50% in the last 3 years. Now compare that to Melbourne. You can see at the start of the pandemic, Melbourne's had a price surge, but it's only been 11%. So little wonder that Brisbane's now more expensive than Melbourne. And the third reason why Brisbane's median values have gone up more than Melbourne's median values is because of migration, both interstate and overseas. So if you look at the annual net interstate migration during the COVID years, you can see that Queensland, you can see through here, Queensland attracted the lion's share of interstate migration, significantly out of New South Wales and out of Victoria. And speaking of Victoria, you can see that during this period here of the pandemic, a lot of people had enough of the lockdowns and had left Victoria in seeking sunshine and lifestyle factors in Queensland. So that was net interstate migration, and you can see that there was a massive surge into Brisbane or in southeast Queensland. And in addition to that, if you look at the net overseas migration, once again, during the pandemic here, all of the capital cities suffered a drop in net overseas migration simply because our borders were locked down. So when you did have a chance to migrate interstate, there was a lot of people leaving New South Wales and Victoria and heading into southeast Queensland, in particular Brisbane. And this data is quite fascinating because it shows two other cities that have moved in their rankings. So this green line here is Hobart, and you can see that it is now dropped away behind Adelaide. So it's gone back to what I consider to be its rightful position, where it's sitting behind Adelaide. And then lastly, we've now got Perth overtaking Hobart in this series of data. So no surprises there for those of you who have been keen property observers. Perth's property market has been going up. So what does this mean for you as an investor moving forward? So I'm of the belief that these new rankings may be tested in the months ahead, because while Brisbane remains a seller's market, the pace of monthly growth in values has eased slightly from 1.5% in October to 1% in December, more or less. Now, as home values in the Brisbane market continue to rise, logically speaking, there is less claim to Brisbane being relatively affordable. And some prospective interstate movers, particularly from Victoria, may decide to remain in their city. Now, I still think Brisbane will grow, but that's on the back of a shortage of properties for sale. But for me, Brisbane doesn't have high enough yields compared to other parts of Australia. And speaking of other parts of Australia, the standout capital city still remains Perth. Why? Because despite a massive jump in prices in the last 12 months, it's still very affordable, particularly when you consider Perth has the second highest per capita wages in the country behind Canberra. Now, I'm not saying you should rush and buy in Perth, as some suburbs have already jumped 50%, and we know for a fact that a suburb can't keep doing double-digit growth. What I'm imploring, and here's my sales pitch, is the need to get educated. What I mean by that is being educated on how to use data to find suburbs that haven't taken off yet. You see, it's the suburb that does 70 to 80% of the capital growth. And once you understand this, you'll never have a FOMO mindset again, because Australia has 15,500 suburbs that are actually individual property markets. And at any one time, there are dozens of suburbs all over Australia that are growing or poised for growth. And this is where our online property and finance mastery course will help you, not just to learn about where to find and interpret property data, but also finance skills that will set you up like an entry-level mortgage broker. Now, this is the thing. My team and I know there is no course in Australia that will teach you both finance skills and data-driven property acquisition skills, so you can have the complete picture and build a property portfolio. So if you want to know more, type the word knowledge in the comments below, and my team and I will reach out to you. And bye for now.